For thousands of years, one small stretch of earth has stood at the crossroads of history. Empires have risen and fallen around it. Prophets have spoken upon its hills, and generations have carried its memory through exile and return. Between desert and sea, between Africa and Asia, lies a land no larger than a whisper on the map. Yet it has echoed across the centuries. It is here that faith was born, that the idea of one God entered human thought, and that a people's story began. From wandering shepherds to a modern nation of scientists and poets, the journey of Israel is the story of survival against time itself. To understand it is to follow the thread that binds memory to destiny. This is not just a chronicle of wars and kings, it is a meditation on identity, how belief can outlast stone, and how hope can rebuild a homeland. This is the story of a civilization reborn. Chapter 1. The Birth of a Nation. Long before cities rose upon these hills, the world was young and restless. Tribes roamed the deserts of Mesopotamia, chasing rivers and stars. Among them was a man named Abraham, called to leave the comfort of Ur and journey toward an unseen promise. He crossed rivers, mountains, and sand, carrying only faith and family, trusting that a divine covenant awaited in a land of milk and honey. From his children grew clans who worshipped not idols of stone, but an invisible creator, an idea revolutionary for its time. This seed of monotheism would one day reshape civilizations. But first came hunger, slavery, and deliverance. Famine drove Abraham's descendants to Egypt, where they were enslaved beneath Pharaoh's son. Out of that bondage arose a leader, Moses, whose courage split seas and shaped laws. Through wilderness and wandering, a new identity was forged. A people bound not by empire or blood, but by covenant and code. They crossed into Canaan, settled its hills, and built altars beneath open skies. For centuries they were tribes and shepherds, then a kingdom united by kings. Saul first, then David, the warrior poet who made Jerusalem his throne. And after him Solomon, who raised a temple of cedar and gold, its walls shimmering with the hope of an entire nation. For a generation, Israel stood whole, its prophets crying for justice, its songs filling the air with praise. But prosperity has a way of dividing hearts. After Solomon's death, the kingdom split, Israel in the north, Judah in the south. Rival kings turned to foreign gods, alliances fractured, enemies closed in. Assyria came like a storm, then Babylon's armies burned Jerusalem to ash. The temple fell, its people were carried away, their city reduced to memory. Yet, even in exile, they did not vanish. By candlelight in faraway Babylon, scribes gathered the words of prophets and ancestors, shaping scrolls that would become the Hebrew Bible. Faith became their fortress, remembrance their homeland. And though the rivers of Babylon carried them far, they whispered still, next year in Jerusalem. Chapter 2. Conquest, Exile, and Survival. Centuries turned. Empires shifted like dunes in the wind. When Persia rose and conquered Babylon, a new decree traveled east to west. Cyrus the Great allowed the exiles to return. They rebuilt their temple upon the same sacred mount, a second house of worship born from the ashes of the first. Hope returned with the smell of incense and the sound of prayer. Jerusalem lived again. But history seldom grants peace for long. From the west came Alexander, bearing the light of Greece and the shadow of conquest. His soldiers brought new tongues, new gods, new ideas. Philosophy met prophecy in the narrow streets of Judea. And after the Greeks, the Romans arrived, engineers of empire, masters of law and order. To them, Judea was a troublesome province on the edge of their dominion. Unrest simmered beneath the marble of Roman rule. Taxes, tyranny, and blasphemy kindled revolt. In the year 70 of the Common Era, legions encircled Jerusalem once more. Flames devoured the Second Temple. Stones tumbled. Priests and poets fled. Smoke rose to heaven like a lamentation. The people were scattered again, across deserts, mountains, and seas. But dispersion was not destruction. Without a homeland, they built one in the heart. Where no temple stood, the synagogue rose. Where sacrifices ceased, study began. Rabbis replaced kings, learning replaced armies. Through exile, they discovered endurance. In Alexandria and Babylon, in Spain and Poland, they taught their children to read the same letters, sing the same psalms, dream the same dream. Wherever the wind carried them, the covenant traveled too. The words written in Babylon became the backbone of a civilization without walls. It was a paradox. The more they were scattered, the more unified their memory became. And across centuries of wandering, a quiet refrain endured, that faith could live without land, but land without faith was dust. Chapter 3, A People Without a Land. For nearly 2,000 years, the sons and daughters of Israel walked the earth as strangers. No throne, no army, no territory, only memory, language, and faith. They wandered not as conquerors, but as keepers of an ancient flame. In Spain, under the light of Andalusian moons, they became poets, physicians, and philosophers. In Yemen, traders and craftsmen whose hands built bridges between cultures. In the forests of Eastern Europe, teachers and mystics gathered around wooden tables to study and sing. Everywhere they went, they built kehilot, communities of prayer and charity, where the Sabbath table was a homeland and the Torah a constitution. The candles lit on Friday evenings became small beacons of Jerusalem scattered across the world. But exile, even when fruitful, carried shadows. Inquisitions swept through Spain. Crusaders rode across Europe, leaving ashes in their wake. In the cold streets of eastern towns, pogroms shattered lives and burned synagogues. Yet each blow forged resilience, each wound deepened wisdom. The people of the book turned adversity into understanding. From their midst rose thinkers who changed not only Judaism, but humanity itself. Maimonides in Egypt wrote of reason and faith. Spinoza in the Netherlands questioned the nature of freedom and divinity. Centuries later, Einstein, himself a child of exile, reshaped our understanding of the universe. They had no flag, no borders, yet their influence spanned continents. They sang in a dozen languages, but ended each song with the same vow: "If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill." Generation after generation, that vow became more than ritual. It became identity. The dream of return waited, patient as stone. And then, as the modern world awakened to revolutions and railroads, a whisper turned to a question: could people scattered for centuries find their way home again? Chapter 4, Return and Rebirth. The 19th century was a time of invention and upheaval. Nations were rising, borders redrawn, identities reborn. Among the Jewish people, a new idea took hold. A dream older than memory, spoken now with new urgency. It was called Zionism, the belief that the Jewish people should return to Zion, the ancient name for Jerusalem and its hills. In the late 1800s, small groups of pioneers left Europe with little more than faith and determination. They drained swamps, plowed dust, planted vines, and built communal farms called kibbutzim. Their hands cracked and their backs bent beneath a blazing sun, yet they smiled. For the first time in millennia, they were planting roots in their ancestral soil. The Hebrew language, once confined to prayer, was reborn on their tongues. Children played in a tongue their ancestors had spoken to God. Ancient words became the language of markets, songs, and love. But beyond these hills, darkness gathered. Across Europe, anti-Semitism hardened into ideology, and ideology into horror. The Holocaust extinguished 6 million lives, men, women, children, whose only crime was to exist. The dream of a safe homeland was no longer abstract. It was a matter of survival. In the wake of such unspeakable loss, the world could no longer look away. In 1947, the United Nations voted to partition the land. 2 states, 1 Jewish and 1 Arab. The Jewish people accepted. On May 14, 1948, in a modest hall in Tel Aviv, David Ben-Gurion declared the independence of the State of Israel. Outside, the radio crackled with his voice. Inside, tears filled the eyes of survivors who had outlived extinction. Within hours, neighboring armies invaded from every side. Against overwhelming odds, the new nation fought for its life and survived. Refugees poured in from Europe, from the Middle East, from North Africa. They came with little more than stories and scars, but in Israel they found not pity, only purpose. Deserts bloomed under their hands, cities rose from sand, hope found a home again. It was not the end of struggle, far from it. But for the first time in 2,000 years, the Jewish people stood on their own soil and called it home. They had returned, and the land, long waiting, answered back. Chapter 5. Building the Nation. The newborn state began not with grandeur, but with grit. Israel in 1948 was a nation of tents and ration cards, of exhaustion and determination. Roads were rough, borders uncertain, and the air thick with both danger and promise. New immigrants arrived daily, Holocaust survivors clutching faded photographs, Jews expelled from Arab lands carrying only memories, families from Ethiopia, Yemen, Russia, and beyond. They spoke different tongues, but shared a single purpose: to build a home that would never again be lost. The early years demanded sacrifice. There was little food, less comfort, and constant fear. Yet even as soldiers defended the borders, farmers dug irrigation canals, and teachers opened classrooms beneath the open sky. Faith in the future became a national resource, more valuable than oil or gold. The desert, once lifeless, began to bloom. With ingenuity and stubborn optimism, engineers invented drip irrigation, turning drops of water into rivers of sustenance. Forests spread where once there were only rocks. Cities like Tel Aviv and Haifa hummed with new industries, and Jerusalem, divided by war, waited patiently for peace. In the decades that followed, conflict would return again and again. Wars in 1967 and 1973 reshaped maps and minds alike. Each generation faced moments of terror and triumph. Yet through it all, the heartbeat of the nation continued: build, plant, create, endure. Israel became a democracy in a region of uncertainty, a small, loud, vibrant republic where debate was as common as sunlight. Within its borders lived not only Jews, but Arabs, Christians, Druze, and Bedouins, a mosaic of communities learning, often painfully, to share one homeland. From scarcity, Israelis built strength. From trauma, they built unity. From survival, they built society. And beneath it all ran an unspoken vow that the suffering of the past would never again define the future. Chapter 6. Innovation in Adversity. In a land short on water, oil, and peace, necessity became invention's mother. Modern Israel turned adversity into innovation, and innovation into resilience. Out of desert soil came technology that changed the world. Engineers designed solar fields to harvest sunlight from the Negev. Farmers perfected water recycling and desalination, teaching nations how to turn salt into sustenance. Scientists, raised by refugees, pioneered medical breakthroughs that healed lives across continents. From the same struggle that once threatened to destroy them, Israelis learned to thrive by thinking differently. They built companies that launched satellites and developed cyber defenses to protect digital worlds. They called it the Startup Nation, an economy driven not by size, but by imagination. Tel Aviv became a hub of innovation. where code met creativity and old cafes buzzed with new ideas. Universities grew into global centers of research, and from laboratories to kibbutzim, the message was clear. Survival alone is not enough. We must excel. Yet even amid progress, the quest for peace endured. Negotiations came and went. Treaties were signed and tested. The story of Israel remained one of tension and triumph, of people who, despite conflict, refused to abandon hope. In this land, joy and sorrow live side by side. Markets hum beside mosques and churches. Children learn Hebrew and Arabic in the same schoolyards. Life, fragile yet fierce, continues forward. Innovation here is not just about technology, it is about spirit. It is the same creativity that turned exile into endurance, memory into meaning. The same resilience that kept a people alive when the world turned away. And as rockets and prayers still share the same sky, one truth remains. The future of Israel, like its past, will be written by those who refuse to give up. Ancient soul, modern spirit. As night falls over Jerusalem, golden light spills across the stones of the Western Wall. People gather to pray, to remember, to dream. Above them, the city glows, ancient and modern, sacred and electric. From the Negev's dunes to the towers of Tel Aviv, from the ruins of Masada to the laboratories of Haifa, this land tells a single story. The story of return. A civilization that has fallen and risen again and again, carrying its past like a heartbeat through time. 3,000 years of struggle forged something unbreakable, the belief that memory itself is a bridge between what was and what can be. That from loss, hope can be born. That from survival, greatness can grow. Today, Israel stands as both ancient and new, a nation that remembers its deserts and builds its data centers upon them. Its people walk the same paths once trod by prophets, yet they carry smartphones and satellites instead of scrolls. They build, they argue, they celebrate, and they dream. The story is not finished. Each generation writes its own chapter of invention, of reconciliation, of faith renewed. The ancient soul endures, wrapped in a modern spirit. And as the wind moves across the hills and the sea sighs against the shore, one truth echoes through time. From deserts to data, from prophecy to progress. This is how a civilization, reborn from dust and dream, rose to stand once more among the nations.